Welcome to EAC Speaks, the podcast where we dive deep into the movement to end the HIV epidemic right here in the heart of the South, Arkansas. I'm your host, Eddie Wiley, and together we're going to explore the stories, insights, and passion that fuels engaging Arkansas community's mission. Join us on this journey as we unite voices and take meaningful steps toward a world free of HIV stigma. Now, get ready for a conversation that matters. This is EAC Speaks. Hello out there in podcast land. It's Eddie, your host of EAC Speaks, and I'm super excited to be bringing you a brand new episode. And we're going to talk about Mental Health Awareness Month. As many of you know, Mental Health Awareness Month is May, and this is a vital awareness day because it shines a spotlight on an issue that affects millions of people worldwide, yet it often remains hidden in the darkness because of shadows, stigma, and misunderstanding. So, by dedicating a month to raising awareness, we break down some barriers, we foster some understanding, and encourage conversations about mental health because many of us also do struggle day to day. Speaking as someone who goes to therapy consistently, I am super thrilled to be able to offer this because in Arkansas, we have an even deeper level of stigma around mental health in HIV. So that's why I'm excited to be bringing my guest today, Chantal. Everyone, give it up for Chantal. Say hello, Chantal.
Hello. I just
Chantal,
imagined like a bunch of like applause, like
I
as you're
know.
walking out on the stage or something at that time. It's very, very welcoming. Welcome. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. That's exactly what I like for people to feel like. I want you to feel like all of the applause is on you. So you may not be able to hear it, but it's there.
It's in my head. It's fine.
Cool. So, Chantal, I want you to tell the people about yourself, where you live, what you do, and how you got here.
Mhm. Fabulous. So, I am a licensed professional counselor. I work as a therapist or a counselor in a community mental health organization here in the state of Arkansas. I live in central Arkansas, but I actually practice out of Russellville. So I commute like back and forth every day. So I have my master's in counseling and I do a lot of work with trauma. I do a lot of work with, well, mostly trauma. I'm currently studying to be a sex therapist. I've
Ooh,
got training in coaching. I know, fabulous work. And working with OCD. I adjunct for a university in the state for their counseling program as well. I'm the incoming president, not president yet. I assume my throne and my reign and my crown in July for the Arkansas Mental Health Counselors Association. I'm originally from Canada. I'm not sure if you can tell on the accent, but I met my husband, who's from Arkansas, teaching English overseas in South Korea for 7 years, and then I ended up here.
oh,
So that's
cool.
where I'm at.
That's amazing. I'm super thrilled to ask a couple of questions about the sex therapy piece. So,
Well, earlier when you're like, it's National Mental Health Awareness Month, it's also National Masturbation Month. Not sure if you knew.
let
So
me write
I'm not
that
sure if there's a
down.
correlation in pairing those two together, but there you have it.
Well, cool. Let's start off with some general concepts of mental health. So,
Mhm.
tell us some of the common misconceptions that you hear, and how can we, as advocates, as people living with HIV, debunk those myths?
I mean, there's so many. I don't even know where to start with those. I think the biggest one that I keep hoping is dying off is that mental health is not a thing. It doesn't
Mm,
exist. It's in your head. And if you tried hard enough or, focused your energy enough, then you just get over it. There was actually like an SNL skit a couple years ago with Bob Newhart, and his counseling services were offered for a fee, and his only counseling advice was just stop it. As if that's all it takes to just, like, end everything. It makes no
right.
sense, but that is one of
No.
the most prevalent ones we still hear. I still get, a lot of misconceptions about mental health not being a thing for men. Like, men
Mm,
aren't supposed to have mental health issues. And then there's a
mhm,
cross-cultural piece as well. African American men definitely should not be having any mental health issues or talking about them. So there's
mhm,
all these different cultural components that come into play. The idea of Hollywood Hollywood did a lot of damage in how a lot of this is perceived. But the idea of like PTSD, just being veterans who've come back from combat, like that classic someone drops a knife in a restaurant or something and he dives under the table because he thinks he's under fire. I mean, that is one example of PTSD, but because that stands so prevalent, there's people with real PTSD from s- car accidents who think that they
Yeah.
don't have it because they don't meet this Hollywood image that's provided. The idea of someone with schizophrenia being psychotic and shooting up a place because they hear voices, when statistically we know that people with schizophrenia are more at risk of being victims than being perpetrators. So
Mm,
there's so many. It just depends on what angle you want to look at it.
yeah. I love that you said that about the PTSD because that was something I had as a belief as well that when someone mentioned it to me, I was like, well, I didn't serve in the army. I was never in the military. And when my therapist explained it to me, it's a traumatic experience that causes like
Mhm,
triggers to the next. I don't have the full definition, so
mhm.
I won't go into that. But not knowing that you can have a traumatic experience that isn't war related can be PTSD.
Well, not only that, you can get PTSD from any event that where there's real or perceived threat of violence or death, and you don't have to be the one who experienced it. You could witness it happening and get PTSD from it. You could hear about it and get PTSD from it.
Wow. Mind
Mhm.
blown. There we
Right.
go.
There's accounts of people, like, in these southern states who watched the Twin Towers fall from 9/11 who have PTSD from it. They weren't there,
Mm,
but they
mhm.
saw it happen, and they experienced in that moment as a witness, and they have PTSD from it.
Wow. So yes, I'm glad that we talked about that because when we talk to professionals, I think sometimes we hide our own trauma because of what we feel like it shouldn't. And so I always encourage my friends, you tell your therapist the
Mhm.
deepest, darkest secrets that you have because if you don't,
Please. Yeah. Well, and not only that, but we have this idea too, it becomes like a comparison thing, right? Where like, well, I mean, I didn't see anything happen bad overseas in a tour of duty, so my trauma can't be as bad as that. So why do I have PTSD? We almost
Mhm.
gaslight ourselves
Ooh,
into
yeah.
believing that we shouldn't be as traumatized as we are because comparatively, some people have it worse.
That is so true. Now let's talk about some intersections of mental health because I have a million other questions that I'm going to ask, but I want to talk about the intersection of mental health and wellness, such as like your social well-being or your physical health. How does your mental health intersect with those?
So I'm so glad you asked that. Because they feed each other,
Mm,
right? So, like, we know about the mind-body connection. We
mhm,
know that, um, there is physical experiences in your body when you're experiencing mental health struggles. That's like people who have anxiety, who feel like the chest palpitations and the pain and the shortness of breath and tinglings in their faces. That's a body response to an emotional distress. They're not separate from each other. So, like, if you're struggling with depression or anxiety, often it'll affect your sleep. It'll affect how your ability to eat. It'll affect your ability to take care of yourself. It'll affect your desire to engage in activities you enjoy. It'll affect your willingness to socialize and get together with the people you care about. It'll change your ability to interact with hobbies or interests that you have. It affects your sense of self, motivation, all those things. So it takes from that side of it. And then the other side of that coin is we know that doing things that do get you more engaged with the people around you, that do get you out of the house and going for that walk or taking care of your physical activity, being intentional about taking care of self-care and sleep and eating habits feeds back into improving mental health conditions.
mm.
It's all do you have you ever seen Legally Blonde, the movie Legally
Yes.
Blonde?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I always love using that as an example, right? Because when she's explaining why Brooke Wyndham couldn't have shot her husband, she goes, Brooke's an aerobics instructor. Aerobics makes you happy.
Yeah.
Happy no, it releases endorphins. Endorphins make you happy. Happy people don't shoot their husbands. That's fact. Exercise releases endorphins. Like so many of the activities that take care of our physical well-being
Mhm.
release like one of the four or many of the four chemicals for happiness. And so like
Mhm.
going for a walk will release three of them on its own.
Mm.
Bring a dog or a pet with you and you've got the fourth one. So there's a very close back and forth between those two. It's like a little tight cycle.
That's good. Good advice for folks to get out there and to know that there are chemicals and
Mhm.
imbalances and things that we have to
Mhm.
that we can do in order to like ward off some of it.
I always tell my clients, I know you think I'm being hippy dippy and hokey when I tell you to just get outside and go for a walk, but there's science
Yeah.
because going out for a walk is going to give you dopamine. It's going to release serotonin. You're going to get some vitamin D. You're going to get some endorphins from the exercise. If you walk your dog and he's happy and you're petting him while you're walking, that's your oxytocin. Like
Yeah.
there's connections between those seemingly innocuous suggestions and the impact they can have on your mental health.
Absolutely, and that vitamin D does help because I know for myself and several other like black men,
Mhm.
I don't know of the other amounts. These are just my friend circles. We all have
Yeah.
a vitamin D deficiency and we all take
Mhm.
medication for it. And I think it's due to our medication, if I'm not mistaken. So we can
Okay.
also have take extra steps in order to increase our vitamin D. Like you said, going outside, doing these things in
Mhm.
addition to taking our medication. So it's important to learn about these things. I thank you for
Mhm.
um, bringing this awareness to us.
That's why, like, a holistic approach to mental health is so important because it seems not connected, but they're deeply related.
Mhm. Yes. So let's talk about societal issues. Now, you
Mhm.
mentioned Hollywood having its impact, but social media has done some good, but we also know that it's
Mhm.
done some bad when it comes to
Mhm.
spreading awareness and harm. So, how do you feel that other societal and cultural factors influence our perception and our treatment, willingness to be on treatment for mental health?
So it's not just like social media, right? It's like any kind of media. And it's beyond like media before we had media. It was also like basically word of mouth and interactions within our communities. It's basically how we react to the perceptions of our community. Um, and that's just like my opinion. I don't have any like detailed education or training or research into this. It's just this is me getting on a little soapbox and talking out of my ass because of my opinions.
That's what
But
we
the way
hear.
that I see it is that before, like, yes, social media has definitely sped up how much access and increased the amount of access we have to all this information. So it has definitely exacerbated the issue, but I don't think it's an issue that's new. I think it existed there before. I just think that before that it was like relegated to like your churches and your communities and it wasn't as on a big scale.
Hmm. So, church,
Yeah.
big thing in Arkansas.
Uh-huh.
A lot of people have come on the show to talk about us doing more work in the church.
Okay.
How does that intersect in your work in dealing with churches and religious practices?
So, as an LPC, it's secular, right? So
Mhm.
it's not based in religion. I don't bring religion into it. But if my client has spiritual beliefs, then we work
Mhm.
that in based on what their beliefs are and how important it is to them. That's where it comes in. I'm not bringing anything in. I'm not going out. I'm not interacting with anything. But if a client comes to me and they're pagan, like, okay, great. What holiday's coming up for you? Like, when's the solstice? Well, how do you plan on celebrating? What importance does that have for you?
Mhm.
If someone is Buddhist, great. What does that mean for you? Like, in terms of
Mhm.
like our meditation, what kind of importance does that have? What kind of value? What kind of support does that give you? What kind of support network do you have as a result? It's a lot about what the client believes and what value it has in their lives and the importance it has in their lives and working with that.
Mhm. So I guess what I'm kind of asking is, has that been a barrier for folks to want to get involved in their mental health treatment?
From some, I'm sure. I've had people who not their church was a barrier. It was more like their worries about how their church might react was the barrier. So I'm
Mm,
not sure if the barrier was actually there so much as the fear of how people would react. There's a difference there.
mm,
It's a subtle
mhm,
difference. There was no indication that the church had said no. It was just that they were worried about how, because at our core we all just want to belong somewhere. So like it's that fear of if someone finds out, what would they say?
mhm.
So that ends up being more of a barrier than anything. I haven't had anyone directly be like, "Oh, my church said I shouldn't be here."
Absolutely. So you mentioned gaslighting earlier. Can you give us like a quick definition? Because I think some people may use it differently, but what is your definition for gaslighting?
Gaslighting, like, is an intentional attempt to make someone question their perceptions and their reality, for the sake of, like, twisting things around. We do it worse to ourselves, I think sometimes. In certain cases, we're very devious to ourselves sometimes. We're our own worst enemies, convincing ourselves that what we're feeling is not as strong as what we think it is. It's not as big of a deal as we think it is. Maybe something wasn't exactly how we understood it to be. I mean, it's used a lot in social media and in terms because it's relatively new information. It's like the last 10 years kind of thing. But it is convincing someone with malicious intent or like with not the best intentions that their perception and their reality of something is not true. Like they didn't say something that they actually said, that something didn't happen that they actually thought happened, that the yeah, that's a
Okay.
not scientific definition, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that's the one that I've seen most consistently. So that's good for folks to know because I think sometimes we can be gaslit and not just by
Mhm,
friends and family. It can also be the professionals we work with or our
mhm,
bosses, co-workers,
mhm,
all types of places. So I think it's good
mhm.
for folks to
That's
know
like,
the term.
"You said I had until tomorrow to do this," and they're like, "No, I didn't. I said it was due at the end of the day," and like, "The heck you did." Like, "I was there for that conversation. You said tomorrow." Like, "Nope, that's not how that happened. It's okay if you don't remember it that way. You've been very busy lately."
I don't see. Look, we need you to give us like a response, how to respond to gaslighters. That's what we need. Okay, so
So if
let's
I could
talk
put that
about.
together, I could make some money.
Okay, look, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Look, I'm always down for the
Yeah.
business. So let's talk about finding a therapist. How do you what do
Mm,
you suggest for folks to go about finding the therapist that works for them?
that's a good question. Geographic area is going to be important, and what's available to you is important because not everyone is located in a metro area where there is access to a lot of different options. For a lot of rural areas, it's going to be your local community mental health center. Um, So, I mean, the Googles provide. Starting there and getting an idea of what's in your area and then reaching out. There's a shortage of mental health professionals right now. So, finding someone who's available. And then it's also a question of what is it specifically that you're wanting to address. If you
Mhm,
are specifically looking for like treatment with an eating disorder, don't come to me because I don't have that training and I'm just going to
mhm,
refer you out. But if you're
mhm,
looking for someone who deals with, like, specific trauma, great. Do you have a specific trauma protocol that you're looking for? Or you just wanna talk it out and get a feel for it? Some people will look specifically like, there's different types of treatment for PTSD, like EMDR is the big one that everyone talks about now.
mhm,
There's somatic processing, that one's good too. Brain spotting is another one that's really popular right now. And so looking for someone with that specific training helps. If you go to the website, there's Psychology Today is a website where you can literally search for mental health providers in the state, and then you can filter through according to like specialization, insurance coverage, populations worked with. If you're looking for someone who's like more Christian based, you can search that way. If you're looking for someone who is like queer friendly, you can search for that. If you're looking for someone who's trauma processing and specific types of trauma processing, you can search for that. It's just a question of what you are looking for and searching for that. And keep in mind too, finding a match is like it is a relationship. A counseling relationship is a relationship, and it gets built like any other relationship. It takes time to build some trust, and sometimes you're not a good personality match. This is extra.
Mhm.
I'm a lot to deal with sometimes. I have a lot of energy, and sometimes if someone's just a little bit more on the gentle and delicate side, I am not a good match for them. So we tend to match people within our clinic according to specializations, gender, personalities, that sort of thing. Because sometimes people
Cool.
have gender preferences. So.
Mhm. So, what are some of the questions do you think folks should ask their therapist before, not even before going, what are the questions that they should ask?
Well, the questions will depend on the context of the individual. So it's about figuring out what is it that you're wanting to talk about, address, or target in your time in therapy, because that'll make a difference. What's important for you in your therapeutic alliance? What kind of techniques or strategies or theoretical orientations are you looking for? And then, so it depends on what matters to the individual. Like, some people will come in and ask me if I'm Christian, and I'm like, "No."
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that I don't have respect for your perspective, and we can work with that. So, it's all very individual based. Depends on the context of the individual.
So tell me some of the signs that you think people can look for when they are considering mental health treatment or therapy or counseling.
I love that question because I am a firm believer that everybody should have a person that they can go to, that they can talk to, because it's non-judgmental. Like, in a counseling environment, there should be zero judgment, genuineness, empathy, unconditional positive regard. So, like, regardless of what you bring to the table or who you are, they're there for it, and they're there to support you through it. So I love that for everybody. I want that for everybody. So it's a loaded question. But if it gets to the point where you are struggling, like, it feels hard. It feels like life just feels like more like it's an uphill climb in molasses, and it feels like it's taking more and more time and energy and mental anything to do anything, even things that seemed easier 6 months ago, kind of thing, then that's an indication. If you've noticed changes in your sleep patterns and your eating patterns that you've ruled out are not medical causes, because that's also important to do first. If you've noticed a change in your motivation to do things that used to make you really happy, or you have an increase in worry and it feels like your brain just won't shut off at night, um, those might be some signs to go and kind of talk things through. But again, back to the default answer of everybody should have a therapist. It's great fun to have someone that you can go to that is there in your corner. So,
Yeah, I think that's important. And so we also talk to a lot of professionals, HIV advocates as well, that
mhm,
work for organizations. So maybe let's talk
mhm.
about how can workplaces create a more supportive environment for their employees' mental health.
Well, the first thing would be to ask their employees what they need. That'd be a good start. Because I think that can make a big difference. Um, Trying to, I guess, look at their organization, and this is coming from, again, I do not have training in this. I am not like a business, mental health, balance, administrative type person, but just knowing from what can make a difference in a professional environment for someone's mental health. Being respectful of the work life balance and boundaries is a good place to start. Allowing people time to engage in their activities and the things that they needed to take care of themselves is a great start. Um, yeah, that would be a major place to start right there. Work life balance is a big one. Not a lot of people feel like they get that as it is. And then not a lot of people feel like they have the boundaries between themselves and their workplaces. It kind of follows them home at the end of the day. So encouraging that could go a long way to helping mental health in general. Having an EAP program is also really helpful, like the employee assistance programs where they
Mhm,
cover so many mental health sessions, advocating for their clients to take it and use that
mhm.
if they need it. Um, and having an awareness of it, like trainings on being more trauma informed, could be helpful.
Mm. So you talked about setting boundaries. Tell me,
Mm.
what's the importance of setting boundaries, and how can people who are people pleasers, I guess, get to that place?
Now you're asking me to like summarize what can take months of therapy time to get into like a single statement. So that's not going to work. But what I can tell you is boundaries are extremely important. Boundaries is deciding what you are and aren't willing to um, tolerate towards yourself and then reinforcing it when that line is crossed. Boundaries are something that you put up around your own expectations. You can't put them on someone else, right? You can't set a wall up around someone else and say, you can't do this, but you can say, I don't want this like done or talk to me this way for your own self. It can help maintain your peace a lot, actually. What boundaries can do is give you autonomy and a locus of control over your environment and your sense of self. It's important. It's hard to do because if you are a people pleaser, it means getting to a place where you're okay with the possibility of someone being mad at you. Right? How rough is that as a people pleaser? You have to be okay with people not being okay with your boundaries. You have to be okay with the idea of people being mad and pushing back against your boundaries
Mhm,
and still willing to maintain
mhm,
them when there's pushback. There's actually a therapist down the hall that used to have this sign on his wall, and I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something like along the lines of, "The only people who ever have problems with your boundaries are the people who had something to gain from them not being in place." If I, like, love you, Eddie, as a person, and I respect you as a person, and you're like, "Chantal, do not talk to me that way." I'm like, "Sorry, bud. I crossed a line, wasn't aware. I'll try to do better." And that's the end of the conversation because I respect and love you, and I understand what a boundary is. Someone who was getting something from you not having that boundary in place will push back. Be like, "Well, why does it bother you so much? What does it matter? Why can't you just suck it up?" Like, that ends up being a lot of the pushback sometimes.
oh, that's so worse to me. Like, if my boundaries affect you that badly, should we even be around each other? So yes. Now let's talk about I always ask folks about self-care. And we know having work-life balance is to me a form of self-care, but what are
It
some
is.
practical tips?
Self-love.
Yes. What are some practical tips for prioritizing mental health during our busy and stressful times?
Right, and that's hard. It has to be really intentional, which is hard because it means making yourself a priority, and we historically are not good at that. Like, that's hard, and it means being very intentional on setting that time, even if it's like, I mean, start small. If you're not used to giving yourself any priority, then like aim for 10 minutes.
Mhm.
Like at least once a day, do something for yourself. And if it ends up that you miss a day, okay, but don't beat yourself up about it. Be like, today didn't work out. I'm going to try again tomorrow. And I think a lot of people tend to mistake self-care and grooming as the same thing. And grooming is a form of self-care, but not all self-care is grooming, right?
Mhm.
So like brushing your teeth, showering, yes, that's a form of self-care. Getting enough sleep is self-care, but so is like, okay, don't judge, but my favorite thing to do in the world is to binge watch episodes of Star Trek while I'm knitting dishcloths. So like for me, taking half hour, an hour to watch some Star Trek and knit is self-care.
Mhm.
Getting to listen to a little bit of an audiobook is self-care. So it's making it more intentional, and people will say, "Well, I just don't have time." I'm like, "That's adorable." But listen, if you were to say, "I just don't have time to eat," like, would that be okay? No, your body would shut down. So it's almost the idea that if you don't take the time to take care of your wellness, you'll be forced to take care of your illness. There's that little meme that you see on Facebook that says that, and it's very
Mhm.
true, actually. And if you know anything of, like, the spoons theory, right? Like, where you have so much energy throughout the day. Are you familiar with that?
I'm not.
Okay. So, like, let's imagine I don't have actual spoons and people are listening. So just imagine spoons. Imagine you got 10 spoons. Hold up your 10 fingers. And you're like, "Okay, this is how much energy I have through the day to get through life," right? On a good day, maybe it takes you like 1 spoon to get out of bed, maybe 2 to cook breakfast because you hate cooking. You know, getting through your workday takes 5, and then you've got 2 spoons left at the end of your day, and that gets you like through maybe supper and binge watching or scrolling through TikTok for 4 hours until you just kinda crash, right? On a bad day, when you wake up and you're already anxious or you didn't get enough sleep last night or something, you don't have the same amount of energy, just getting out of bed now takes you 4 fingers, let's say, right? And then you're like calling in sick to work because you can't think you make it, and it takes you 3 just to get out of bed to go to the bathroom. Do you know what I mean? Like, everything feels a little bit harder, but you still just have those 10 fingers to work with, those 10 spoons to work with. Self-care is contributing back into your stockpile of spoons, say. So let's say you've got your 10 fingers on a bad day, and it takes you 3 spoons just to get out of bed, and then it takes you 2 spoons to make breakfast, and you go, "You know what? Today's kinda rough. I'm just gonna take 10 minutes and do a meditation." And then that gives you, like, a spoon back,
Mhm.
right? And so then, like, you have a conversation with a family member who's just too much, and you've lost 3 spoons, but then you're like, "Screw that person. I'm gonna go for a walk," and you get 2 spoons back. So, like, self-care is a way to replenish your well or recharge your battery or insert random analogy that works for
Yeah.
you here to get you through the rest of your day. And it's so funny because if I were to tell you, "Hey, you have diabetes, you need to make sure you watch what you eat, you need to make sure that you get exercise, you need to make sure that you get sleep," you wouldn't question it.
Mhm.
But we make it about ourselves and giving ourselves the gift of our own time and our own love and our own respect to actually do the self-care. And suddenly people are like, "Well, that's just not how life works."
Oh, yeah. I think it's always interesting to hear from people who have a harder time prioritizing themselves and prioritizing mental health because there are a lot of
Mhm.
things that impact it, like you said, social factors, religion,
Mhm.
even
Mhm.
self internalized stigma is a big problem for
Mhm.
folks. So I always encourage
Oh,
people
absolutely.
to ask questions and be honest with yourself. Like if you be honest with no one
Yes.
else, be honest with yourself.
So what I'm a former teacher, so I'm always going to advocate for anything that's writing related. But if you're okay like writing a journal or like writing a letter, sit down with pen and paper. Has to be pen and paper. Don't cheat and try to type it out because it doesn't work the same.
No.
And ask yourself the question like, why don't I prioritize myself? And then write everything that comes to mind. Don't edit, don't try to like censor it, just write in free flow. You'll be amazed what comes up. Like
Mm,
sometimes there is childhood experiences that have led us to feel like we're not worthy enough of that kind of time because no one else gave it to us,
mhm,
or that we're not able to love ourselves because we weren't lovable to others.
mm,
We also come from an industrialized society where the idea of being productive is your value. Your worth and your value is tied to what you can do and what you can produce. So if you're doing something that's not producing or doing, then what value do you have? Which is why you run into so many people monetizing their hobbies because my hobby only has value if I can cash this cow in for something later.
I saw a meme today about not everything that you do as a hobby has to become something that you make a profit off of. That just brings joy
Right.
sometimes. And I love to just enjoy my hobbies. I don't feel like I should just have to get paid to produce for others, mostly is what you're getting at. So,
Right.
yes.
Exactly. The process itself is the joy, not the product. Like just
Yeah.
enjoying the doing is valuable enough. And then I've had people say before, and this is a valid concern. I mean, if a lot of hobbies do cost money for supplies and it's expensive to get the supplies, then the connection becomes, but if I'm going to spend this money on the supplies, then there has to be a reason for it. And they're looking for that cost value justification. And the idea that it gives them peace, gives them joy, makes them happy like rarely ever enough justification to do it.
See, we are so hard on ourselves, Chantal. Damn it.
We really are assholes to ourselves. I'm sorry. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but you can bleep it out when you edit.
We really
And so
are.
so
That's a good word, though.
we are. And so sometimes what I'll say too, and I was like, "That's interesting." They're like, "Well, I can't. I can't. It's just it's worthless. It's not worth my time if it makes me happy, if it's not achieving anything." And I was like, "Interesting. Would you say that to your 10-year-old daughter? Like, would you say that to your 13-year-old son? Like this hobby is not going to cash anything in, so it's not worth your time." Like you wouldn't. because we love our family and we love our children and we show them the unconditional love we can't show ourselves. So I
Hmm.
was like, treat yourself like you are one of your kids. Like, give yourself that kind of love for a minute and give yourself the permission to do the dang thing.
Absolutely. That word that I got from there's this program called Elevate. They give you a key and people give you a word on that key. And the word that I got was grace. And so I've been incorporating grace like into my life. So I encourage others to do that as well because like you said, we're so hard on ourselves to where it
Mhm.
we wouldn't do it to someone else. So if we offer ourselves the
Mhm.
same grace that we give others, then I think we'll all
Mhm.
be in a better place. Maybe not in our full, beautiful, blossoming selves, but we will be in a better place.
Right. It's at least a step in being nice to yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Being nice, kind to yourself. So tell the people how they can find you if they want to get in contact with you or your
Sure.
organization or however you want to promote.
Yeah. So, if you are interested in mental health care, Arissa Health is the organization that I work with. None of my opinions are representative of the management of Arissa Health. These are just my opinions, just so that we're clear. As an LPC, but Arissa Health has clinics locations all over the state. You can just go to the arissahealth.org website and find a location near you. We've got tons. I'm in the Russellville location, and if you just call up there, then they can direct you on what you need to do to get an intake done.
Awesome. That's cool. There's even one in my hometown of West Memphis.
There you go.
Yes, I see it all the time. I didn't know it was like a larger system. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it is actually. We have offices from West Memphis, all the way over to like Rogers and Fayetteville area, and then down into like Little Rock area.
That's
Maybe over
cool.
to Helena, West Helena. We've got a lot of coverage actually.
Oh, that's great. And I believe if you get in touch with EAC, there may be some transportation things, maybe. So if you are in a rural area and you do need to get into your medical appointments, shameless plug for engagingarkansas.org, find how you can get contact with someone to do the mileage program. So yes, please do that.
Transportation is such a hard thing to get for people, especially when they don't have that access. So I think that's absolutely gorgeous you guys offer that.
Yes, it's so great. Now, Chantel, are there any last remarks for this episode?
No, I'm really glad that you had me on and I got a chance to talk with you, Eddie. I really appreciate the opportunity. And I just want to remind everyone has mental health. um, and there is something beautiful about giving yourself the gift of your own care and the gift of your own love and respect to be able to get yourself the care and help that you need to have someone in your corner. And even if it's something small, like doing a little bit of research on little things that you can do on a daily basis to help take care of yourself, but prioritize that. How about that? Homework if you choose to accept it. Do something 10 minutes today, whenever you're listening to this, for yourself, regardless. Nothing illegal, but like have fun.
I love that. Have fun, nothing illegal, but do something for yourself. That's a wonderful call to action. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And if you do want to get in contact with any of those services, whether it's the Mental Health Association for Arkansas or Reese Health, please just rewind a little bit and you'll get right to the information and find the website. And also, if you would like more information about engaging Arkansas communities, check us out online on all of our socials. And yeah, stay tuned for our next episode of EAC Speaks. We'll be more than thrilled to see you. And if you want to be a guest, hit us up. Chantel, say ciao.
Ciao. Au revoir. Salut. Merci.
Oh, oui, oui.
The EAC Speaks podcast is partially supported by the Arkansas Department of Health through a grant funded in part by the CDC. All discussion is solely the responsibility of each participant and doesn't necessarily represent the official views of Engaging Arkansas Communities, the Arkansas Department of Health, CDC, or the U.S. government.